Welcome to the Calhoun County Board of Health meeting. We'll go ahead and get started at 10:01, depending on the clock. In order to be respectful to the public, we're going to try and stay within our 1 hour time frame. So I'll ask everybody to hold their questions until the public comment period. I recently saw a sign in another state posted on a bathroom wall that read, "Washing hands saves lives." When the COVID pandemic began, at first I remember seeing many memes and cute online videos and catchy songs all promoting hand washing. But quickly, hand washing promotion went away, and instead experimental vaccines started to be pushed. I wonder why the focus of promoting good hygiene was changed to promoting a vaccine.
Well, you know, I remember as a school nurse, that was one of the big things that we talked about were the different ways of preventing spread of infection. So I appreciate that comment because hand washing was one of the number one, as well as covering your mouth and staying home if you're sick. And I really hope we can keep pushing that and talking about it in the public realm. Thank you.
And my guess is that there's a bunch of tools in that toolbox to help keep people healthy, and washing hands and wearing masks and getting vaccinations are all part of that in that toolbox.
One of the things that I've learned recently is the recent research that has been undertaken to decide what have we learned about the pandemic and what are the new findings. And one of the things that we had already gotten a hint at was the importance of fresh air. And fresh air is very helpful in reducing the spread of the diseases. And this program that I was watching pointed out that probably the simplest way we can impact fresh air is by monitoring the HVAC systems so that there's more air exchanged. Government buildings typically are built with the lowest responsible bid, and we're always quick to delay maintenance. And exchanges in public buildings sometimes isn't the healthiest. My particular experience, and I share with Lindy, is we became very familiar with the October epidemic. In October, kids in schools and teachers get sick. And part of that is the respiratory diseases. I'm more concerned about things we can do to prevent the spread of influenza. That's a much more common dilemma. And in light of this new information, it reminds me of an issue we dealt with several months ago on whether or not we accept a grant from the state to finance someone whose job it is to inspect the air quality in public buildings, particularly schools. A lot of the schools around, all three of the major high schools were built in 1970 or earlier, and equipment ages. And I would like us to revisit that issue to see if we can get the data. Maybe the buildings are done very well, but as long as we have the October epidemic every year, we need to be addressing, and this is new bits of information about the importance of fresh air exchanges. Minimum standards should be raised. I think that's the answer, but we need to get the data first. I hope we reconsider.
Thank you for that. First up is to review the minutes. Did everybody get a copy of the minutes? Everybody had time to review. I want to say thank you to Kelly, the clerk. They were perfectly accurate. Didn't have any kind of change. Mary Jane, I saw numerous emails between you and sometimes both the county lawyers about the minutes. There was some confusion. Is there any further clarification we need?
No, I just have used two. As you know, I had spent quite a bit of time on Longview City Council, and at that point in time, the minutes went out early, so the public had an opportunity to review the minutes with the agenda packet. So they weren't seeing them for the first time at the meeting. And so I don't know that that's not a good idea. I think that it makes sense to get the minutes out so the public has a chance to review it. And in fact, that leads me to I'd hate to jump ahead.
But they are going out early.
they're going out 5 days prior to, no.
I
to
think
the
even before that,
public. To the public. I know that we did get them 6 days prior to today's meeting, which I'm very thankful for. But the public doesn't see them until they go out as well. And I think that there's an upside to keeping our meetings transparent and making the minutes available to the public earlier. Does that answer your question?
no, I was asking if you had any further questions.
No, I was just clarifying my conversation with the attorney, and I thought you understood that. I thought you were looped in on that.
Oh, I saw
Okay,
them.
you were then. Thank you.
So I'd entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
I make a motion to accept the minutes of the meeting, of the last meeting of Board of Health.
Any further discussion on the minutes?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, where are the minutes going to be available for the public? Once they're approved?
I'll let the clerk answer.
The minutes are on the Board of Health website, which is off of the Health and Human Services. So there's a whole page with the minutes, the agenda, any attachments that is provided.
So we go to the list of departments, you go to the Department of Health and Human
Department of Health,
Services,
yeah.
click on that, and then scroll down till you get the menu for the Board of Health.
Yes, they have their boards and committees, and you would click on the boards and committees, and they're all listed. The Board of Health is there. Yeah. It's all on that website.
Thank you.
So motion on the floor is to accept the minutes without further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay, next up, Carol or Gina? Gina, hi Gina. Wanted to give us an update on the RFQ request for qualifications.
Yes, good morning, Board of Health. So last spring, the Board of Health brought up issuing an RFQ, a request for qualifications for the health officer. So we published a RFQ for the health officer work. It was posted in June of 2023 and it closed in September of 2023. So it was posted for about 3 months. I just wanted to give an update on the responses that we got. We got one response. It was from Clark County Public Health, who is our current provider of health officer services. So we currently contract with Clark County Public Health for health officer services, and we get to work with Dr. Krager, who's the deputy health officer for Clark County. So in looking at next steps and moving forward, so we got the one response. Our typical next step would be to move forward with a contract or a contract renewal in this case, which would go through the Board of County Commissioners. So we will look to do that unless we get other direction.
So Gina, is it staff's recommendation that this board recommend preparing a contract for Clark County to provide medical health officers? Make that recommendation to the Board of Commissioners?
Sure. We're sort of in uncharted territory. We've not, gone through this before with the Board of Health. I know that the Board of Health, the role is to appoint the health officer. In this case, the one respondent we got is already appointed as our health officer. So the appointment's already been made. And so the current contract expires the end of December. So we'd be looking to renew that contract. And typically that goes through the Board of County Commissioners. So if there is a recommendation, I think that, the Board of Health could do that. I don't know if we need to do that.
I think we could put that on the agenda for the November meeting and pass it on to the Board of Commissioners, I think, at that point. That sounds okay.
Is there any new information we would learn between now and then?
I think everybody should get the application, review the application and discuss it, think about it. This is the newest update we've got. Thank you for that, Gina. Anybody else?
In lieu of moving forward with the current health director or a health officer, would there be an option of reopening the request for qualifications, the RFQ? I mean, if we're not going to do that, then, then what are we going to review that we don't already know about Dr. Krager?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
There's always that option to reopen. We don't, I don't know if we would get any additional responses.
Sure.
They still meet the qualifications to be a health officer, and we have a good working relationship with our health officer. So,
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So yeah, we'll have to talk to that. It's December. Well, the meeting will be in November. Okay.
So a question, do we have a meeting in November?
Yeah, I was gonna mention it later, but might as well bring it up. Due to some scheduling conflicts with bids, I believe it was, some contract bids. If nobody has an objection, we'd like to move the meeting to instead of November 28th to the 21st, 1 week ahead. Does anybody on the board have a problem with that move?
I do my best to accommodate, so I'm not speaking for myself there. I'm suggesting this is one occasion where we have a full board here, and this is a pretty big issue, so I would be loath, barring some explanation, that we wouldn't, I think, take a vote now, which is, I believe, what 2 members have already suggested.
To take the vote on the
recommendation.
oh, so not the, okay, I thought we're talking about the meeting.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, on the recommendation, but that's just my opinion. We have a full board here.
Mm,
So are you looking for a motion?
Well, I think I'd like to see at least the paperwork first. I haven't seen any of it. This was all new news today, so it's a little premature, I think, for a motion. That's my opinion. We still have plenty of time and
Well, I'm not sure whether I should be speaking up or not, but we have been with our current health officer for at least, what happened to Gina? How many years? 4? 4. And so I don't know whether I would subordinate myself to statements on a piece of paper, barring something rather unusual that would be found in that piece of paper. Gina has looked at that piece of paper. Is there anything unusual there?
no, there's nothing unusual. It describes the experience, the history, which we've had hands-on the last 4 years of experience directly with this particular health officer and health officer relationship. So nothing unusual. As I mentioned, they still meet the minimum qualifications to serve as a health officer, and we would,
I would say part of the issue, although, did you want to talk, Mr. Dahl?
I was just gonna say, we did review the RFQ, right? I mean, we had input on what we wanted to see in the,
I believe so.
pretty sure the RFQ came to
I
us. We
think
had
I
a,
did.
so the response has to be in response to a document that we approved. And if you're not seeing anything abnormal out of that, then I would probably tend to agree with Commissioner Mortensen that we could probably handle that business.
Okay, yep, I'm open to that.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that direct the staff to move forward, putting together a contract for Dr. Krager in Clark County to serve as the medical health officer for our community.
Okay, motion on the floor to retain Dr. Krager. Any discussion? Further discussion?
Yeah, I do not want to approve a new contract for Dr. Krager or Dr. Melnick or the Clark County people. I don't think they served us very well through the COVID stuff. The primary hook is that I was always asking for a balanced presentation discussion of the pros and the cons, and I never was afforded that. I was always told things and promises for the future that, oh, if you get the R factor down below a certain number, this thing will die off and so forth. It's the litany we've all heard, the 2 weeks of endurance of a mandate and everything would get healed. The biggest problem I have is that any serious problem needs to be laid out on the table even-handedly, and that was never done. So in this case, it turns out that it was probably a mistake. And I tend not to want to reward mistakes. It's just one of those things. I think this is a very important spot for us to have a health officer who understands the vagaries of research and the vagaries of prognostication and has an appreciation for the conflict we have when we mandate things. And I don't think we had that. And
You know-
by the way, I spent many hours individually speaking with them, and they were always interesting academic discussions, but I take a look at results and we failed.
Well, you know, Arn, I would agree with you, and nothing personal with Dr. Krager because he followed the party line from CDC, but it just turned out not to be some of it correct, or to the best of our knowledge, it did not seem to be correct or common sense. And what I would like to do is have a conversation with Dr. Krager, make it maybe in a work session that just talks about some of the things that I'm concerned about happen, because I like the man. You're a great guy. Nothing personal. But that one issue was very difficult, controversial. And in some counties, they were able to push back a bit on the CDC and get past some of the things that were required. And our Cowlitz County commissioners did that with that the refusing to be masked. And I just feel like the health officer needs our support and understanding of what we need from him. And maybe he'd feel more comfortable looking at other options of what CDC says or what the politicians say, or, you know, not common sense says, because I really like common sense. So that's my opinion. And I don't know how we go from here with it, but that's how I feel about it.
And I would just say too that, yeah, Dr. Krager's been very responsive. I like working with you. But the Dr. Melnick has not been here ever. I think maybe one meeting, but I don't think so actually. So I'm not sure why we would contract with Dr. Melnick, you know, instead of Dr. Krager directly. Wouldn't that be an option?
We contract with Clark County Public Health. And then Dr. Melnick is the primary health officer and Dr. Krager is the deputy health officer. And Dr. Krager has sort of been assigned Cowlitz County. So that's why we see Dr. Krager. Dr. Melnick kind of oversees a lot of different things, and they serve as the health officer for a number of different counties. So we're assigned Dr. Krager, so that's why we see him, but I'm happy to invite him to come in if you'd like.
So if that was the point I was gonna make, we actually contract with Clark County. If they changed health officers and personnel, we'd end up with somebody different, right?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're typically, I mean, we would be involved in any of those discussions and potentially be part of if, for example, if they were, hiring someone new, would be part of that process and have input on that.
I think the intention, at least part of the intention of of doing the RFQ was to have something a little bit more local. I go back to Dr. Melnick. We don't see him. I don't know why we would have to contract with them or another county instead of Dr. Krager directly.
We've had that arrangement in the past, and we ended up going back to this sort of regional model, if you will, of working out of Clark County, and then they serve multiple counties. It seems to work well in the sense that, disease activity can cross over from county to county. So it's been helpful for someone to have that knowledge of what's going in and what's going on in Clark County, as well as what's going on in Cowlitz County, just to have that consistency there. It also helps with coverage. If our health officer goes on vacation, when Dr. Krager goes on vacation, Dr. Melnick's able to cover. And we've never had any issues with that in terms of needing to reach out to the state, for example, and have them cover. I know that's an option that has been made available within the last couple of years. And I think our preference would be to keep that coverage with the health officers that we know and work with, instead of pulling someone in from the state that we don't work with on a regular basis. But so it's worked well in that sense as well. But.
So if I'm hearing that right, our options are if we don't want to be with, if we decide you don't want to be with Clark County for whatever reason, we still have a health officer, but it's assigned to us from the state. Is that how I'm hearing that?
Regional health officer.
There's a regional health officer. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, comments, things like being concerned over vacation time or something like that, that seems like pretty much a stretch. But I mean, there are a lot of reasons for things, but I would like them prioritized anyhow. If there is a regional health officer, is our current county health officer subordinate to the regional health officer?
Our current health officer doesn't answer to the regional health officer, if you will. If he still and he could probably say this better than I can, but he still has to follow the state health officer guidelines and directions of the State Board of Health and whatnot. There's not a direct oversight between that regional health officer and our local health officer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if we had a local health officer who didn't agree with the regional health officer, what happens then?
Well,
I think we know.
that would be interesting. I will say, our preference as a health department is to have a local health officer versus, and I say local health officer, I mean, the arrangement we have now or a direct local individual, as opposed to working with the state assigned health officers. And I just.
Yeah, I understand that preference. I have a little bit of trouble with it because we had spoken to our HHS, to you and to Carol, asking for a more balanced presentation on the website, because really what we want is to educate people, and you can't educate them by just saying you must follow this and this is I was unsuccessful at trying to get HHS to do anything along those lines, and I don't view your happiness with the health officer as being an overriding consideration.
We did end up making several changes to our website eventually, and we're happy to get input, as what is on our website, we're happy to get that input. And I think the idea of having a work session with the I think Lindy mentioned that, and talking through some of these components and outlining sort of the relationship we hope to have with our health officer, I think that is, would be beneficial.
You'd have to offer me an explanation of why that wasn't successful before. We had discussions with them 3 months in a row or something like that, an hour or longer discussion, and it was always cast as, you poor little boy, you just simply don't understand. And that's not a very useful approach.
So I guess I have a question having to do with the apparent unsatisfaction with the current health officer. Have our outcomes been bad for Cowlitz County
Yes,
as opposed to the rest of the state and the rest of the community, the rest of the country?
our kids are failing in schools.
Well, I'm talking about our health outcomes and the
That was
whole
because of the
mental
the whole
lockdown.
spectrum, not just their outcomes in school, but their longevity of life and their illness levels. And, I'm not a doctor and I don't pretend to be one, but I'm wondering how we fared statewide and countrywide in terms of how the health of our community survived the COVID.
Well, I think the mental health was a huge issue in the children and adults both. In my family alone, I can speak to
And I
that.
think those comparisons are often, because it's a non-constrained environment, there are too many variables involved. And just because somebody didn't jump off a cliff doesn't mean that we were doing a good job by not jumping off a cliff. If you wanted a name of a state, you could call Florida and see how that made out. And there are probably other places that didn't pay the heavy price we paid around here.
So I'm inclined to table this motion till the next one. It's only 3 weeks. We got a meeting in 3 weeks. There's more controversy than I thought there would be, and this is new news. So if it's okay, I'd like to just table this and then we can have some more discussion.
Well, you'd need
Well,
one of us.
I don't, there's no point. If a majority of this board wants to fire Dr. Krager, then do it. A
Well,
month's
that-
not gonna
I don't-
make any
I
difference.
don't know that that's the
That's-
majority. I mean,
That,
I don't know.
you haven't been counting? I don't see where a majority is in support of him right now.
I didn't say I want to fire him. I said I'd like to talk to him.
Yeah, and I
You
say,
said nothing personal,
Well,
but
no,
but
I
you
act-
haven't
I-
gotten the answers you want.
I'd like to talk to him
The
personally.
problem isn't with Dr. Krager. The problem is you're still mad at the state
Yeah.
for having overridden a lot of common sense rules. It's not, it's not a problem with Dr. Krager. Be careful what you ask for. Dr. Krager did support changes and went slow and listened to us. Did he make a big public announcement that he's going to break the state law and the guidelines? No, he did not. But it could be a lot worse if we had somebody assigned from Olympia, and that would be the alternative. We're forgetting the results of the RFP. We only have one application right now. And,
except for,
and from my perspective, Dr. Krager has been very open, very flexible. Yes, there were some mistakes made definitely by the state and their draconian effort that did hurt businesses with those shutdowns, that did hurt kids being denied school for a year. I mean, our society has not yet come to grips with the impact of those kinds of decisions. But that's not Dr. Krager's fault. He worked well with us under very complicated and difficult decisions because people in Olympia were power hungry. That's who your complaints are with. It's not with Dr. Krager, because we've all admitted he's been open, he's been conversant, he's answered our questions. He hasn't given us the answers we wanted because, well, he is a doctor. None of us are. And, there were some edicts that came down. I have not had the disagreements that Mr. Mortensen has had. Because Mr. Mortensen didn't hear the answers that he wanted. I mean, I get that. I get that all the time. But majority rules, if the four of you don't want him back, then let's say so. Let's rip the Band-Aid off quickly,
But-
rather than a slow, painful
Yeah,
process, because
I don't
it
think we
is
need to
per-
rush this
because it
through.
is personal.
I don't think we need to rush this through. I think rushing makes mistakes usually. What I said, is why the option of having Dr. Krager apply and contract with him directly.
Because this county has not decided to hire a full-time health officer.
In the same hours, same position, same job description, just contract with him directly. So it's an option. It's something I think we should explore. I think we should discuss. It wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared for any kind of a vote on that today. I think we can wait for 3 more weeks and then we'll be prepared and then we'll get your Band-Aid if you'd like.
I think that my colleague is projecting a little bit here. There's nothing personal in anything I do here. I've said before, when I'm sitting on the dais here, I have no friends, I have no enemies, I just have problems. And the way I look at them is I get up the ladder, up 10,000 feet, and I look down and I say, how did we do? And who is responsible? And there is a lot of room for discussion there. It is true that I didn't get answers from Krager, actually mostly Dr. Melnick. And I met with them individually. There was no other commissioner in there. It was probably HHS was there, and Melnick, Krager, and I. And we decided to do that along the spirits that are being discussed here. So let's find out what we can and can't do and what is real and not real. And it never produced anything. And there was never, I believe, an honest scientific appraisal of the situation. Scientists don't hide from the data. They also feel like if they say something like, if you get RE, the effective R less than some number, something goes away, and it doesn't go away, then you discuss it. Well, what did happen? What's going on? Never was that conducted in any way that was productive. It's okay to have a health officer who is constrained to the mandates. But it's not okay for the health officer not to acknowledge the shortcomings, and it's not okay for HHS not to put the counter arguments on the website. That's a censorship that destroys a nation.
So as I said, I'm inclined to hold your motion, Mary Jane, till the next meeting where we can talk about this a little bit further.
I don't think you can do that. The motion belongs to the body now. Isn't that right?
Did we do away with having to have a second? Because I don't
Yes.
think we ever had a
Yeah.
second.
Don't need a second. Well,
Interesting.
You can ask for somebody to vote to table it if that's what you want.
yeah,
But
I entertain a motion to table the motion so we can therefore look into things a little bit more clearly in a short amount of time without rushing things through.
I will second that, and I would like to meet with Dr. Krager. I think that he could share thoughts that might make me understand better how to deal with this. I'm not an expert either in any of this. I'm just
So I think
a nurse.
that's
trying to work.
your motion to table. That's your motion to
Motion,
table,
I make a motion to table
the table.
the decision on Dr. Krager and the health officer until next meeting.
So at that point, I'll ask for a vote. That, I want to make sure I'm doing this procedurally correct. I'm not exactly sure. It's uncharted territory. a motion after a motion. Can I table the motion, the first motion? Or,
We have to vote on the motion that Lindy just
oh,
made.
to
And,
so that's
and
the newest motion. So the newest motion is to table the previous motion until 21st of November. All in favor?
I,
Aye.
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 Opposed to the motion?
No.
2 opposed? And 2 abstain, 2 opposed, 1 abstention, and 4. So the motion carries. And we will look into this. I think it's just not something we should rush into. It's just news that just came 20 minutes ago. And because of there's lots of bad feelings, as people have just acknowledged about the COVID, that's a perfect segue into the next item, which is a medical freedom resolution. This is a medical freedom resolution. I'll just read the title is Medical Freedom Resolution to establish the right to personal choice regarding the use of masks and vaccines during disease outbreaks.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we refer this motion back to Corporation Council for further review and correction.
We've gone back and forth plenty of times, and we have, I believe David Berger is on the line with us today, and he was going to clarify anything, but got it down to just a few points. So before we go to that, I'd like the clerk to read the resolution. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of bad things said, and we haven't even read the resolution out loud yet. So with that, Kelly, can you take over?
Sure.
So my motion is out of order? I thought we didn't have to have a second for a motion.
Your motion was to refer it back to the lawyers, even though that we've already been going back and forth with the lawyers? And the lawyer is online now? That motion doesn't make sense to me.
The last memo I read from him raised some very serious
Oh,
objections.
I think that's what we should talk about that in the discussion. I agree, we should talk about those.
So you're ruling my motion out of order?
No, I don't. You want to leave your motion there to still table this? You're talking to table this before we read it and send it back to the lawyers. That's your motion? I'm asking your clarification.
The motion is, I mean,
Or can you
the
restate the
resolution
motion?
is filled with inaccuracies and mistruths. We need to get a cleaner version if we want to move forward with it.
I think we need to read it out loud first, see what's in it. It's not like,
Well,
it's not like Nancy Pelosi where we have to pass it to find out what's inside.
but Mr. Chairman, I think you can say motion's out of order, or you can call for a vote. Those are basically your only options.
Is David Berger online? Is he online? The attorney's online, so I'd say that motion is kind of out of order.
So if I can interject, how about when the motion is read or the resolution is read, every time the attorney has an issue, then that issue is raised so that we can have that conversation?
I would rather
Um,
just say what my comments are in general, and the thing can be read all the way through. I think Commissioner Mortensen's correct that basically the ruling should either be it's either ruled out of order or the board takes a vote on whether it's tabled and brought back to me. Because I did identify issues and I can summarize those issues today after it's read, or it can be brought back to me. It's up to the board, but I think Commissioner Mortensen's comments about it either being ruled out of order or taking a vote on it is correct.
Would that be out of the ordinary for a chairman to rule that out of order?
That's not my call to make. I think that's in your discretion.
Okay, then let's rule it out of order, but we have him online and we'll talk
Yeah.
about
And
that.
then,
So
Ms.
I'd like to read through the,
just a second, Ms. Malink, offered a good suggestion, I think, and I don't think we have to vote on it, but if you read the whole thing in one block, it gets too hard to really parse or find the problem issues.
Well, the problem issues have been noted by the lawyer and I've got them noted here. So there's actually 3 on the front page and 1 on the back. So I'd like to read it in its entirety, let the public hear what it's all about. And then we'll go back and we'll discuss the little points that the lawyers have brought up, the 3 points, 4 points that the lawyer brought up, and we can discuss those in the discussion phase. Is that okay?
It's your prerogative.
Oh,
Mr. Chairman, a point of, I can't remember the motion. Are we still on for 11 o'clock dismiss adjournment?
We'll see. It's getting close.
I mean, do you still intend? You said at the beginning you wanted to cut us off. at
Oh, no,
11
I'm
o'clock.
not gonna cut it off if people want to talk. If the business is not done, we will probably cut it off by 11:30 for some people gotta leave. But if we can get on it, maybe we can get it done. So Kelly, can you please start to read it? See what people think.
Whereas Washington State Law RCW 70-05060 establishes responsibility to supervise the preservation of the lives and health of people in Cowlitz County through the Cowlitz County Board of Health. And whereas the Cowlitz County Board of Commissions has previously passed Resolution 21005 of January 12, 2021, which both uncontested and unanimous recognizing that citizens can make responsible decisions that don't need mandates. And the 4 principles of medical ethics being respect for the body, autonomy, beneficence, and non-maleficence. Justice and the tenets informed consent are imperative in the practice of medicine and healthcare. And whereas lockdowns, quarantines, and mandates have proven harmful to children's mental health and education, while at the same time the infection fatality rate for COVID-19 was and is less than 1% in adults, and a fraction of that in children, and total death counts in the U.S. remain steady before, during, and after all phases of the pandemic, with COVID deaths skyrocketing even while influenza deaths completely disappeared from statistical data. Whereas there is no constitutional authority to restrict individual and alienable human rights that are given to us by God and protected in the 9th and 10th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution and the Article 1, Section 1 of the Washington State Constitution. And whereas any prohibition on peaceful assembly is in direct violation of RCW 4306220, Section 2G, which specifically does not permit the suspension of the First Amendment rights even under a declaration of emergency. And whereas there is no conclusive medical evidence such as mandates that produce a demonstrable decrease in disease. And whereas Cowlitz County and the state of Washington suffered immeasurable economic and societal harms as a result of the governor's proclamations that have been pursued in a non-uniform, unequal, and arbitrary manner, along with unconstitutional mandates, restrictions, and forced business closures have led to the destruction of commerce, jobs, and livelihoods. And whereas citizens have personal and practical recourse to choose their own guidelines to mitigate their personal risk of contagion with viruses, diseases, or illnesses. And whereas the children of state residents were denied access to appropriate education for which taxes continue to be paid. Whereas state and federal mandates irreparably harmed millions of our precious senior citizens by unnecessary use of lockdowns, restrictions, and mask rules that isolated them from normal social interactions, basic caregiver access, and from their family and loved ones, causing a dramatic worsening of loneliness, stress, anxiety, and depression, increasing the risk for dementia and the death from all causes. And whereas citizens have expressed that constitutional rights were violated through discrimination based on medical and vaccine status at the same time that federal and state health agencies failed to be transparent, forthright, and consistent in protecting medical freedom of the people of Cowlitz County. Therefore, be it resolved by the Cowlitz County Board of Health that coercion and undue influence shall not be used to compel any individuals to use medical intervention. Cowlitz County shall not force any individual person to put something onto or into an individual's body without informed consent of said individual and respect their rights of refusal. That the unalienable right to medical, religious, and conscientious exemption from any medical intervention requirement shall be considered. That reasonable accommodation to the use of exemption to a required medical intervention shall respect the full body of science regarding the intervention declined. The medical condition the intervention is meant to prevent a naturally acquired protection. That public health emergency of international concern shall not be unilaterally imposed on our county. Cowlitz County hereby affirms the right of its citizens to make personal choices regarding the use of masks and face coverings and vaccines, acknowledging the individual's autonomous right to make health decisions based on their personal beliefs, circumstances, and discernment.
Thank you for that. Now you've all heard it. I would like to work backwards just to make it easy. The only point on the
I
back
take it there's
page-
a motion to approve the resolution?
Yeah, let me finish. You wanted to talk about the problem, so I'm trying to talk about the problem. Do you want to make a motion to accept the resolution? Okay,
I would like to hear from the attorney
yes, so,
on all the 4 points that he's made.
yes, so
so that the
let's
public can
work
get in the loop.
backwards. On the second page, under the therefore be it resolved, there are 6 points. The attorney has only one question about point number 5, and I think we can fix this. David, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I'll read it. It says that any public health emergency of international concern, that's fake, pronounced fake, shall not be unilaterally imposed on our county. If we change the word shall to should, would that resolve the problem?
Would not be unilaterally imposed. I guess the issue is that by saying like an emergency or a public health emergency shall not be unilaterally imposed, that would violate state law to the extent that the state has the legal authority to declare an emergency, and there's a top down as a political subdivision of the state. Those are binding on the county, and so you can make policy statements that you disagree with state mandates and emergencies, but you don't have the authority to say that we're not going to follow it. So removing the shall would, I guess, make it sustainable.
So that would be my first discussion point, would be change the shall to should. And just so the public understands, public health emergency of international concern, that is mandates coming from the WHO and international health agencies. So that's number one. Then let's go back to the front page, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth whereas, David, which is the second one on the first page, or the first one?
Are we going? So I'll summarize and then we can talk about specifics. But so overall, kind of as I said earlier, if you want to make policy statements about disagreeing with the state approach, you can do that. But when you say we're not going to do something or make inaccurate legal statements, that's what I have a problem with. The medical stuff is out of my purview. So like the first one, whereas there is no constitutional authority to restrict individual unalienable human rights that are given to us by God and are protected in the 9th and 10th Amendments. So legally, that's not true. The government can lawfully restrict constitutional rights in certain situations. And I given the example before of the popular example of you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. That's under an old United States Supreme Court case. And in the public health context, the state government can restrict some of your freedoms, such as preventing you from assembling or gathering and requiring the use of face masks. And those, the state, at least our state mandates from the COVID pandemic have been challenged many times in the courts, and they have all been upheld. They have not been ruled unconstitutional. So I think that's an inaccurate legal statement. So that's an issue. The second one would be where there's a legal item discussed, whereas and any prohibition on peaceful assembly is in direct violation of RCW 43.06.220, section 2G, which specifically does not permit the suspension of First Amendment rights even under a declaration of emergency. Again, that's not true. Subsection 1B of that statute talks about the governor being after a state of emergency is declared, being able to prevent people from assembling or gathering. And subsection 2G is talking about the waiver or suspension of a state regulatory obligation prescribing the procedures for the conduct of state business. So that's saying something completely different. So I think that's saying that if the governor cannot suspend, like, for example, the Open Public Meetings Act, if the waiver or suspension would conflict with First Amendment rights. So I think that's probably why you saw they still required remote public meetings during the pandemic, so that public business wasn't just being conducted in private. There had to be mechanisms so that the public could have a voice. So that whereas statement is just not legally not correct. And then the third.
So before you go on to the third, if I might interrupt and ask a question. So David, when you have a legal statement, you generally try and trace that through a line to some sort of foundational statement that everybody can feel is true. Am I correct so far? So if a local community says we do not allow people taller than 6 feet into the county, then we really have to trace that back to some fundamental concept of law. So in this case, what I'm thinking about is we have a system that is largely, I would call incestual, you might say. Reminds me of the discussions during the founding of the country, where King George was legitimately authorized to do all the things he did, but some folks on this side said, no, that isn't a good thing. So how do we know what the part is that we play here? And we do not necessarily know the consequences of leaving a statement in. And so I need a little more guidance there to help us decide. So I'll stop here.
Okay, I guess the way I kind of think about it is that going back to, you're talking about, King George, and I guess I'll fast forward a little bit to Marbury versus Madison and the beginnings of judicial review. So really it's the court's purview to say what the law is and to say what the Constitution is. And here, and
But wait, section, you're talking about the 1803 decision? Yeah, that actually was something more like a law repugnant to the Constitution is no law. It doesn't say that the Supreme Court itself is the only entity that can ever decide that. In fact, that's a point that in many ways dehumanizes us all and says we're too stupid to understand language.
I would say what Marbury versus Madison holds is the context of that was, I believe Thomas Jefferson won the election, and John Adams was leaving office, and there had been I think it was the Judiciary Act of 1789, where they expanded the judiciary, and Madison was appointing a bunch of judges at the 11th hour so that the Federalists could still have power, judicial power. And one of the appointments didn't get delivered, and it was Marbury's. He was a judge. And the Judiciary Act of 1789 provided that the Supreme Court could have original jurisdiction over that act. And so Marbury files in the United States Supreme Court as the trial court level for original jurisdiction, wanting to get his judgeship. And
A question on that, the Supreme Court decided that it itself had the sole jurisdiction over the matter, and that's kind of refers to my incestual statement. If we are not authorized as people to understand language, then we throw our hands up.
well, so let me finish. I'm getting to it. So,
Okay.
so it goes to the Supreme Court, and Justice Marshall is faced with the decision of he can say that, yeah, you were supposed to deliver that judgeship because the appointment's already been made, and I'm going to issue a writ of mandamus commanding you to deliver that appointment. But he knew that it wasn't going to be followed and that it would undermine the power of the United States Supreme Court. So what he actually did was say that the Judiciary Act of 1789 was unconstitutional itself, because the Constitution of the United States is what sets up the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, and Congress can't pass a law that changes the original jurisdiction. So the law itself was unconstitutional, and that resolved the dispute. And until that time, the concept of judicial review hadn't been established yet. So it was the United States Supreme Court that has the final say over whether something is unconstitutional or constitutional. So here, the courts have weighed in on the governor proclamations, and there have been many, many lawsuits, and to date, none of them have been found unconstitutional. And so what I see as the line for what is characterized as unconstitutional or not is how have the courts come down on it. And so as for what we know, I guess that's where I'm coming from, I guess.
Okay, does the Whiskey Rebellion offer us any understanding here? See, I think the purpose of the resolution here, at least for me, I have no pretense that we're going to tell anybody how to do anything. But I do want people to understand that there is more to this issue than just mandates, and that we as individuals in this country have a right to speak. And one of the more useful things we can do is use our office to let people understand the situation. And that's why I have no trouble changing the shall to a should. And if there is if you can offer us a correction here on some sort that helps us, but barring that, I think it's really up to us to stand up against things that are really not supportable.
I guess I would just say that it should be worded in a way where it's formed as a policy statement rather than as an actual fact. So like, for example, the last whereas section says, whereas citizens have expressed that constitutional rights were violated through discrimination. So, I mean, I think that's sustainable because it says that the citizens are expressing their opinion that the constitutional rights were violated, not saying as a fact that the COVID mandates were unconstitutional, when in fact the courts have upheld them as constitutional. That's.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I think we disagree on that because again, you're referring to a higher authority that decides what is constitutional or not. And just like everything else, like in the Whiskey Rebellion, the people spoke up and then the government backed off the same way as the original Stamp Act, I think was cut back some. People do have a choice when they express their thoughts that no, you can't use the Constitution to crucify us.
Well, the overall point is the United States Supreme Court is the supreme law in the land. That's who gets to declare ultimately what's constitutional or not. And that the local board itself doesn't get to substitute its judgment for the courts. That's the separation of powers doctrine. The Board of Health is the legislative and the courts are the judiciary. So that's just the structure of our government.
So
Okay, then
David,
the
could you-
question
oh,
of
sorry.
what, other than your feeling that these couple of whereas clauses are not accurate, what's the downside of having them in here? So say it's your opinion versus other people's opinion, but ultimately there are going to be some consequence that arises from that.
I think, I mean, the bigger one is in the resolution section, since that's where the actual law is, but when you, the code itself, let's see, let me pull up it's in
Okay, so-
70.05, you know, that chapter basically there's consequences if the board legislates inconsistent with state law. There can be potentially criminal penalties. So
do we have that?
but-
Like you said, the whereas clause largely is an expression of a sentiment. Well, the teeth are in, therefore it be it resolved area, right?
right.
Okay, so I would claim that unless there's something, well, you were going to go down the list and I interrupted you. What was after those two whereas clauses?
The third one.
Yeah, third one. Whereas Cowlitz County and the state of Washington suffered immeasurable economic and societal harms as a result of governor's proclamations that have been pursued in a non-uniform, unequal and arbitrary manner, along with unconstitutional mandates, restrictions, and forced business closures have led to the destruction of commerce, jobs, and livelihoods. So again, the reference to the unconstitutional mandates, this is the same comments that I've made before, that they've been upheld as constitutional. So I think a better word choice from a legal perspective would be, if you want to say they're unfair mandates, but to date, they've been upheld as constitutional.
We talked about that, David, and I agree. So just for clarification to the public, many cases against the governor are being tried and have been tried, but so far they have not been found unconstitutional. So the problem is that we're calling it unconstitutional. So therefore I would vote, or I would propose that instead of unconstitutional, we change that word to unfair mandates. And that would take care of the legality on that one, David, if we change that to unfair.
Yeah, that was my point on that one, yeah.
So now we're down to just those 2 points.
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering if I can ask
Please.
council a question. In the recommendations or the statements, the therefore be it resolved, there are, I believe, 2 or 3 statements that say the county And it proposes stuff that the county will or will not do.
Which
Um,
one?
And having this board pass a resolution declaring what the county will do goes a little bit beyond their the mandate for boards of health, which is primarily to make recommendations and oversee health officer.
I think you
But
might be
that's the
talking,
question that I wanted to ask. Can you make that kind of a declarative statement by a board of health? That should properly be the Board of Commissioners, correct?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is true. I'm not sure what you're talking about specifically in the resolution, but as an overall statement, I think you're correct that the Board of Health is limited to their purview and that other county operations such as oversight of staff and whatnot is the purview of the commissioners.
in a previous version, I think you might be talking about the previous version did say that Cowlitz County assets would not be, that's not in here.
That's the latest version.
Yeah, that's gone.
Well, I think that is a valid question as to, so we pass a resolution here. Does that have anything to do with the operation of the county per se? Because maybe I'm out on left field here. I think something like this would, I hope, come before the Board of County Commissioners, and the board would then vote for something like this. So I would think the motion might be for the Board of Health to give a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners to pass this resolution.
From what I've understood, Rick, maybe you can clarify, but the resolution is the beginning point, and then the commissioners would turn it into an ordinance, is if that's what was gonna happen.
Oh, no, there's gonna be no ordinance out of this.
So therefore, it's just a resolution.
So I'm going to go back to what Commissioner Weber mentioned earlier. You know, we've had a lot of conversation about what the attorney feels is appropriate and consistent with the law in this document. And then there've been a lot of discussion. I'm thinking two things. Number one, before we approve this, I think we need a clean copy that is legal, that the attorney does bless and that does feel good about. But the other thing, I think there are some other inaccurate statements in here, primarily because he did agree that he knows the legal aspect, but I think there's also some medical statements here that I would like to see if we can get some clarity on.
What? Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know that stuff, but I do think that there are people in the audience who might speak to that issue.
Yeah, well, so we've got it down to from 4 down to 2 points that the lawyer has questions with. One, I got a note that says it's kind of debatable whether they have the constitutional authority to or not. The second one, which is it's incorrectly citing RCW 4306-220 .2G, where yes, you can, the government can restrict you from yelling fire in a crowded theater, but we're not really talking about that, is my first point. My second point is that point, whereas any prohibition on peaceful assembly is in direct violation of RCW and does not specifically permit the suspension of the First Amendment rights, even under a declaration of emergency. That sentence was already passed by the commissioners, including Commissioner Weber. So this is just a repeat of that. So I just wanted to say
When was that passed?
2021, I
In
believe.
2020, I think.
This is from a past resolution.
And I believe the attorney said that it doesn't matter. It was wrong then and it's still wrong. It wasn't legal then and it's still not legal.
Incorrect, and it was incorrect then and
It's
is
still
incorrect now,
incorrect,
he
yes.
said.
That's correct. Yeah. It was not a correct legal statement then. It's not a correct legal statement now. So I think the fact that it was in a prior resolution has no bearing on the accuracy of the statement.
So I would just suggest in the interest of time, you know, if we've got it down to these 2 points, you know, maybe we just cut those 2 points out.
Would you repeat what those 2 points are?
The 2 points are, whereas there is no constitutional authority to restrict individual unalienable human rights that are given to us by God and are protected in the 9th and 10th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 1 of the Washington State Constitution. That's the first one. The second one is right after it, which I just read.
And your
Well-
suggestion is to do what?
I would say the second one, we can just get rid of. The second one, I'd be willing to just cut that one out. The first one, I believe, David, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we put citizens have expressed there is no constitutional authority to restrict, would that suffice?
I suppose, because then it's framed as a opinion statement rather than a fact.
So there we've fixed that. So I will read that again. So therefore, whereas citizens have expressed there is no constitutional authority to restrict individual unalienable rights, and that those rights are given to us by God and are protected in the 9th and 10th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution and Article 1, Section 1 of Washington. So then that would be fixed. And then to, I guess, in the spirit of negotiation, get rid of that one that was already passed and voted on, the previous one that's technically incorrect. So that's the whereas any prohibition on peaceful assembly is in direct violation. That's the 6th whereas section. Anybody have a objection to getting rid of that? No? So if we get rid of that and change this to citizens have expressed on the previous whereas, and change the word unconstitutional to unfair. And the last point is point number 5, that any emergency of international concern should not be unilaterally imposed. I think at that point, we've complied with all the lawyers' questions or concerns.
Kelly, I'm not seeing where you're putting in unfair.
That would be on,
You change that to whereas citizens have expressed there is no authority, no constitutional authority.
well, I was just simplifying it by saying, removing the word unconstitutional, because that's, I think, is the big hangup. Because it has not proven
Yeah.
unconstitutional. It has not been proven unconstitutional yet.
Mr. Chairman, if I'm not out of order, could I make a motion?
Please.
Is that legal? Okay, I make a motion to table this decision on the resolution until the next meeting due to a lot of continued questions. And my confusion at this point exactly as to what we are going to have in the end. Just my motion.
Motion on the floor to table it. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, and just a question. If it is tabled, will the public who's been very patiently waiting to speak have an opportunity to speak? Otherwise,
Yeah.
if the debate's over with,
Yeah,
I would not favor tabling it.
Yeah, I
Because I
think
think we deserve to hear them.
I agree too. The public should go. I don't think we need to table it, Lindy. We still have a little bit of time and we've got the points worked out with the lawyer.
Okay.
Our next meeting isn't until 1:30, so we've got plenty of time.
So let's just quash that motion. And so again, we've got it down to, well, all the concerns will be addressed by, have been addressed that the lawyer had. And again, I will say that it's the 5th whereas we'll have an insertion of citizens have expressed in the first part of the sentence. The 6th whereas, which is right after that, will be eliminated. And then the 8th whereas we'll have a change from unconstitutional to unfair. And then the last is number 5 on the resolution part. The word shall be changed to should.
I appreciate you going over those a number of times, but I'm not ready to vote on a motion, but I'm ready to side along Lindy and say that I think we need a clean copy to work from and not one that we've just penciled through. But I do think we also need to hear from the public. So I'm anxious to hear their comments.
Yep, first I'll entertain a motion to accept this with the changes that have been made.
You've got a motion on the table.
Oh.
Table it,
The table, oh, sorry.
unless you rule that one
Okay.
out of order, but
So,
it's maybe
no,
too
no.
late for that.
Yeah, no. Motion to table it, all in favor, say aye. Yep, opposed, nay. I'm the only one voting. Motion to table this medical freedom. All in favor of tabling it, meaning for another 3 weeks, say aye.
Aye.
2. Opposed? Nay?
Opposed.
Opposed.
3. 3, and Commissioner Weber
I abstain.
abstain. So it fails. It's a tie vote. So the motion failed. So now I'd like to get to the public too and let them hear it. That's why I didn't want to table it. So should we, but before we can offer the public to talk, we need a motion to see if we're going to accept it at all. Is that correct?
No, you have that backwards. We need to hear from the public before we make a decision.
No, I mean, but to open the discussion period, we can just go ahead and discuss it?
We currently do not have a motion on the floor.
Correct.
So you can optionally call for a motion, or you can open it up,
Yeah,
open up the floor. Either way, the public will get to speak.
yes, so
I
would,
just assumed because you were managing the discussion of the document that the motion was from you.
no, I can't make a motion. So I'd entertain a motion that the medical freedom resolution with these changes be adopted.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Okay, so now let's open it up for discussion. Please keep your comments to a short period, brief,
Okay.
if you can. please.
Robert's rules have flown out the window this entire meeting. You left a motion on the table that the woman there next to Commissioner Weber made. So everything you've done since then is in violation of Robert's rules. You need to study them, sir. You do not know what you're doing. The total number of deaths in Cowlitz County is 432 plus and counting. That makes us number 3 in the state behind tiny Columbia and Ferry County. So when you started this meeting talking about the metrics and how we have failed, you seem to think we need more dead people to demonstrate we have succeeded. Are you insane?
I don't think the mandates have succeeded.
So how many more people need to die or should have died to satisfy this bloodlust you seem to have? It's insane.
A bloodlust.
Okay, so I'm curious then, in the data in your statement there, the total death counts, I'm quoting you, in the US remains steady before, during, and after all phases of the pandemic, which you have in scare quotes, with COVID deaths, again in quotes, skyrocketing even while influenza deaths completely disappeared. Are you suggesting those 432 plus Cowlitz County citizens who died did not exist? Or are you suggesting that they died from something else? And is this board about to endorse a conspiracy theory that the 1,180,405 Americans that are gone never existed? What are you saying with that statement? So that's something you should clarify before you pass anything. Then you say there is no constitutional authority to restrict individual unalienable rights, human rights that are given to us by God. Who is God? Ra, Apollo, Zeus, Buddha, Eric Clapton? You need to specify that. I see you've removed the other section about emergency responses, so that's good. Then you say, whereas citizens have personal and practical recourse to choose their own guidelines to mitigate their personal risk of contagion. You can only pass a communicable disease if you've been exposed to it. But if a person can simply choose to believe a virus doesn't exist, as it seems you are doing, are you suggesting that person is somehow exempt from public health measures? Are measles and polio vaccine requirements no longer enforceable at Cowlitz County Public Schools? How about the laws regarding tuberculosis, RCW 70.28? Those have not been ruled unconstitutional. If we had a tuberculosis outbreak, would you just be fine with people willy-nilly breathing on each other? How about HIV? How about mandatory quarantines if, God forbid, we had an Ebola breakout? Other hemorrhagic fevers? No problem? Then you say Cowlitz County shall not enforce any individual person to put something onto or into their body without informed consent. Okay, are helmet laws no longer going to be enforced in Cowlitz County? Because that's a requirement to put something onto your head. Commissioner Dahl wears one, I suppose, when he rides his motorcycle around. How about seat belts? That's putting something onto my body as required by law. How about an infant car seat? That's putting the child into something as required by law. Are you saying that those are no longer enforceable because you maybe don't agree with them? Restaurant staff can't be required to put soap and water onto their hands? Is that what you're saying? Because I actually have it on good authority that norovirus, hepatitis, and fecal bacterial contamination are just hoaxes spread by Procter & Gamble to sell disinfectants. You should include that. You're a clown, Kelly.
I can see that the First Amendment to the Constitution was well weaponized before me, but I will not do that to you. Pretty much, I can tell, Kelly, that you're new to this, and I'm sorry for all the flack that you're getting. Being
Thank
a
you.
chairman is rather difficult when you've just come in and you're treading water and you're learning. Robert's
Definitely.
Rules of Order comes with practice. And as much as I have used it, I still fail, and I've been told I'm 95% of the time do it the right way. So take a deep breath. We'll get you a cheat sheet.
Thank you.
What it appears that I'm trying to not be human and look at this as a document, as a tool. What this actually is not a law. This is a policy that the health department has come up with after a lot of workshops. So you've been working on this for a considerable amount of time, as I have been told by the county commissioners. Thank you for this consideration. I am one of your citizens, and I appreciate it. I have had lost trust. Now that I've seen you people working, Lindy, thank you. I've seen some faces that I recognize. I'm a little bit more comfortable.
Thank you.
And thank you for also for slowing it down about automatically outsourcing our health department. I appreciate that. Okay, now getting back to the document, it seems it appears from listening to the arguments from the attorney that he was interjecting. He doesn't like our Constitution much, is what pretty much is what I'm hearing. And that's our founding document, along with the one before the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, where it says that we have inalienable rights. I believe in God, but obviously some other people don't. What about we have inalienable rights? Natural inalienable rights, because sidebar, God gave them to us, but if that's what it takes to have this document move forward, can we change that verbiage? I'm willing to work with you on this. I'm
The
not
one-
happy to see my constitution out of the document. Absolutely not happy. And I can tell you that there's going to be quite a few people behind me that are not happy about having that. It's nice that you have that in this. But this is a statement on policy again. This is not a law. This is where this is where our county stands and us as the public stand. Now, I happen to have been paranoid back at the beginning of COVID and washed my mail and washed my vegetables, and I still got COVID. And I'm a senior citizen. I got a hard case of it. But if I had a disease, a sickness or whatever, I go back according to history of the plague or any other disease, that the sick should be the ones that are quarantined. You deliver food on their porch, whatever, you know, you help them through without contact until they are better. Not everybody. Not the whole world stop. So I'm liking what I'm seeing, and you've exercised great working ability, and something's on the floor to work. Thank you very much for your insisting that this be read, because I haven't had no access online anywhere to see this resolution. And that absolutely is part of an open meeting, is to present what you're working on, a resolution.
I think can you just announce exactly where that is again? Just so the public knows, the materials are sent out at least a week before the meeting, and you can find them.
The Board of Health is on the Health and Human Resources or Health and Human Services website under the boards and committees. So it's under Board of Health, and all their information is there. There's a page, it's all on there. Any of the attachments. It was also included in the regular Board of Commission meeting, and the attachment was in that also. So it was in 2 different places.
Over the weekend, the links were not available.
We will look into that.
So that's why I sound sketchy. It's because they weren't available. When I found out that this was coming up, I went to look and couldn't
Yeah.
find it.
We will look at that.
Error doesn't really help. So I'd like you to move forward on this personally. And actually, the people that I represent would like to see you move forward on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. 1 second, we have a hand up before you, and then we'll get to your comments. Somebody online like to say something? Go ahead.
Hello, is it my turn now?
O. The big O.
Are you able to hear me all right?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to say I really disagree with the way that the Board of Health is going forward and making this policy about this topic. This resolution is framed from a particular perspective, that there were all sorts of problems with the way our county handled the pandemic, and the board is taking the position that you're setting some policy to change that, or is basically in opposition to the way things were conducted. But I don't think you've actually heard from a number of pretty relevant and important perspectives. You've basically made up your minds and then started crafting a policy based around your own personal perspective, or perhaps the perspective of some individuals who have spoken to you. The public in Cowlitz County is over 100,000 people. There are many different sectors in our community, including a large clinical system of medical professionals. There are nursing homes that had to protect their residents during the pandemic and have some sort of procedures that they could follow to keep infection from spreading within their facilities. There are school systems. There are all sorts of different ways that our community, systems that were impacted by the pandemic in our community. And this board has not heard from any of them in a public way. You have not created any opportunity for those systems to inform the policy you are trying to make. And I think that that's bad practice. I think as a new configuration of the Board of Health that's trying to be more open and to be inclusive of the many different perspectives that exist in our community, I think you should have started this process by saying you want to talk about the pandemic and how our community responded, and inviting those particular sectors that were particularly impacted to come and present information about their experience during the pandemic. I think that would have led you to a much more inclusive and comprehensive understanding of the broad public, weighing many different, sometimes competing perspectives together. If you actually take the time to hear from all of those and specifically seek out voices that you haven't heard from yet that are important to the equation, you're going to get a much more well-informed policy statement. The current statement is from one particular perspective, from one group of people that feel they were not heard during the pandemic and are now trying to take this opportunity to force their perspective onto the rest of us. I am glad to see that your attorney prevented you from inserting policies in here that would have harmed our county's ability to respond in an emergency. I think that was excellent. Those things were struck in from the past version to the current version. But I still think this document has a long way to go, and it's missing a lot of informed perspectives from various systems in our community, like nursing homes, like the hospital, like the school districts. I think if you want to have a discussion about how our community responded to the pandemic and how you'd like to see a response in the future, I think those voices are critical. And I think you should not pass this resolution until you have heard from all of the different people.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Tom Hickey. I'm a Calais County resident, excuse me, since 1990. And my statements concern this new iteration of the medical freedom resolution. First, thank you for maintaining the statement about medical ethics in the preamble. Thank you for removing the erroneous and inaccurate preamble about masks. Thank you for removing the erroneous and inaccurate preamble about COVID treatments such as ivermectin. And thank you for modifying and are removing several of the specific resolutions. And I'm particularly heartened that you replaced the word honored with the word considered in resolution number 3. Second, as a family medicine physician practicing primary care for nearly 40 years, I've had various frustrations over recommendations from ivory tower academic institutions and various government agencies such as the CDC and the NIH. These entities have tremendous power over medical care, and primary care physicians are expected to follow such recommendations. One example of a horrible recommendation has been the pressure to prescribe narcotics for chronic pain. This has had lasting negative consequences across America. I have a libertarian streak myself. Nobody likes to be told what to do. It is reasonable to question the value of mandates, edicts, and school closures. Your passion about the response to the pandemic is warranted. I have comments and concerns about some of the preamble statements and the specific resolutions. I am heartened to see your statement on medical ethics. The 4 principles you cite appear to come from the book Principles of Biomedical Ethics by Beauchamp and Childress. It's a good book. I've read it. I encourage all the Board of Health members to read that book so you can understand these principles in depth. I understand these ethical challenges, having served on the St. John's Ethics Committee, having chaired the committee, and from doing dozens of medical ethics consults in the hospital. Patient autonomy is a foundational principle of medical ethics, but not absolute. As a physician, I have an obligation regarding non-maleficence. First, do no harm. As such a person I determined to be addicted to narcotics should not receive narcotic prescriptions from me, even though that may violate their autonomy when they come requesting such medications. Similarly, when a patient declines treatment for a disease which is communicable and puts others at risk, my duty is to inform the Calais County Health Department, and the health department may need to compel the patient to have treatment or to quarantine if the patient declines treatment. You changed the word honored to considered in resolution number 3. That is a good change and is consistent with your obligations to the public health. You should always consider patient autonomy, but you may not always be able to honor it. Your preamble about lockdowns, quarantines, and mandates includes the statement, quote, "The total death counts in the US remain steady before, during, and after all phases of the pandemic," unquote. This is simply not true. It is disrespectful to the many citizens of Calhoun County who were sick from COVID, hospitalized from COVID, and died from COVID, and their families. It also denigrates the clinicians and support staff who worked tirelessly to relieve suffering and reduce deaths during the COVID pandemic, particularly during the horrible summer of 2021. I know this personally because I was leading a large medical group. We had to redeploy clinicians from ambulatory clinic work to hospital work to supplement the hospital providers. We had to circuit ride hospitalists from Portland Metro to St. John Hospital as well. All surgeries, except life and limb, were suspended for around 6 weeks that summer at nearly all institutions in the Northwest to free up beds for COVID patients. Death rates overall increased in 2020 and 2021 versus 2018 and 2019. Calhoun County Health Department reported an 18% increase in total deaths in 2021 during the COVID pandemic. Two of you, Commissioner Mortensen and Commissioner Weber, approved around $100,000 in September 2021 for extra refrigeration capacity to deal with the excess of deaths. I know you were both committed to fiscal responsibility and would not have approved that money unless the coroner really needed it to deal with those excess deaths. I urge that someone on this Board of Health make a motion to remove this erroneous, disrespectful, and misleading statement. Your preamble about the effects of lockdowns, etc., on senior citizens deserves some comment. I am glad you have a statement about loneliness, stress, anxiety, and depression. I take that as a reflection of your commitment to improving mental health in the county. The preamble also states that deaths from all causes in the elderly increased. This statement is true. The elderly were much more vulnerable to COVID-19 than younger folks, and the death rate in this age group increased dramatically. Please note that this statement directly contradicts the other preamble claiming that deaths were steady. I urge that someone on the Board of Health make a motion to modify this statement to be more accurate, and I hope this Board of Health will continue their support for mental health and addiction treatment and advocate for the resources needed to improve the situation. I was going to speak about the legal issues, but the lawyer spoke. So finally, I come here with no political agenda. I don't represent the left or the right. I've been troubled that my friends on the left seem incapable of giving President Trump credit for sponsoring Operation Warp Speed. That work was phenomenal and got us 3 safe and effective vaccines against COVID-19. It was likely the most effective effort in the whole pandemic. This medical freedom resolution seems to come from the right, attacking our governor and public health officials at state and federal level. With respect to health issues, I recommend that this Calhoun County Board of Health take off your political hats and wear your public health hats. I'm reminded of Hurricane Katrina. It devastated New Orleans and Louisiana. There was clearly poor preparation for it and a poor response once it arrived. At first, there were lots of accusations back and forth between the federal government led by President George W. Bush and the state and local leadership. The political football didn't help. To his credit, some months later, President Bush sponsored an independent bipartisan commission to look back at what happened during Hurricane Katrina. The commission did its work. The learnings have informed responses to natural disasters since, and we have had much less loss of life because local, state, federal, and NGO groups are all working from the same game plan and in a coordinated fashion. We need such an independent commission to be formed with respect to COVID-19. I urge you to channel your passion on this topic and advocate for a similar commission to be sponsored and tasked with looking back and determining what we got right and what we got wrong. The CDC has already admitted they failed us during this pandemic, but I'm skeptical that real change will occur if this remains a political football. The right thing to do, the ethical thing to do, and the thing we must do for future generations is to have an independent, empiric evaluation of this pandemic and our response to it. And in conclusion, let's not forget how well our state did during the COVID pandemic. While I am unsure whether Governor Inslee's actions or inactions made a difference in the COVID pandemic, I am glad I live in Washington. Our age-adjusted death rate is 6th lowest in the country, lower than 44 other states, much lower than the average death rate of all states, and well less than half the death rate of the worst state. Let's celebrate that and move forward in a constructive manner, committed to doing better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd just like to address a couple of things that the good doctor was just speaking on.
Before you go, we're losing a member of the board right now. Do we want to motion to table this until the next meeting?
I'll make a motion to table this to the next meeting.
I second that.
No second needed, but all in favor of tabling this to the next meeting, say aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Ran out of time again, but go ahead.
Well, just briefly, I wanted to, I hope you didn't go. We know that these 3 vaccinations that were effective, according to the doctor, we know that one of them was taken off the market, the Johnson & Johnson. We know that, so there was 2. But these were listed as experimental vaccinations on the FDA website. When you give somebody a vaccination, and I'd like to ask doctors, when you were giving a person an experimental, and it was listed that way by the FDA, an experimental vaccine, and you didn't tell them that you were giving them an experimental vaccine, then that's a violation of the Nuremberg codes. And in fact, throughout this COVID response, all the Nuremberg codes were violated. So if you want to talk about ethics, you're right away coming out of there in the wrong place. I know over at the hospital, they were reusing the masks, the medical people. I know that I stood down on the line with those people that were losing their jobs, and all the ones that were quitting were the ones that were working in the COVID section of the hospital. That was the majority of the nurses on the line down there, and they all lost their jobs. They all either quit or got fired. So when you want to talk about ethics, there's nothing ethical about what happened around here. Nothing. And I don't know to address your resolution about that, but the fact is the misinformation continues. And there was nothing right about any of it. And I applaud you for trying to come up and put some words against it. But for a fact, none of that was right. And I just listed couple big reasons why. You guys heard me speak all about masks before, so I'm not going to go on about that. But the fact is that when you administer an experimental something to a person and you don't tell them that it's an experiment, it's a violation of the Nuremberg Code. It ain't the law, but that's a code that we made after World War II to prevent this kind of experimentation from taking place. So there's nothing ethical about that.
Well, actually, the mandated that you take it, so I'm not sure how that fits in your argument, but I think it strengthens it.
Well, I know everybody wants to be done, but it's just like when the lawyer's talking about the argument against the constitutionality of what our constitutional rights and stuff are, and I don't know what all the cases are, but the fact of the matter is that they're not arguing whether it's not constitutional. They're arguing whether under the emergency, the governor could make these mandates. I think that's the argument there. It's not that it wasn't unconstitutional. It's just that they found a way to get around it. And you may all remember, we voted on the continuity of government. It was a bill that passed that we all voted on, and personally, I voted no on that one, but that's where the governor got his power from. But it doesn't negate the fact that it was unconstitutional, that they were violating the Constitution. So they found a way to work around it. I applaud the effort here to kind of try to work back around the other way. And we're in unusual times now. And the thing is we want to see this. I mean, for me and myself, I don't want to see this happen again. And somebody to tell me that, I'm going to, well, I know everybody wants to go. I'm not gonna get into the mask thing. We know how ridiculous it is. So, good job and thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
It's been a-
Yeah, oh, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. We have somebody online first. Yeah, go ahead, person online, Darcy. Can you hear us, Darcy? Darcy, you got your hand up, ready to hear you? Oh, we'll try and come back to Darcy.
Okay, the warp speed was with the vaccine Regeneron, which I believe Fauci got rid of that. And it's called an experimental gene therapy, not a vaccine. In this book, The Real Anthony Fauci, basically what he was just speaking about, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Public Health by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Dr. Joseph Goebbels wrote that a lie told once remains a lie, but a lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth. Tragically for humanity, there are many untruths emanating from Fauci and his minions. RFK Jr. exposes the decades of lies and is by Luc Montagnier, Nobel laureate. I'm not sure if I spoke his name correctly. Bobby Kennedy is one of the bravest and most uncompromisingly honest people I've ever met. Someday he'll get credit for it. In the meantime, read this book, Tucker Carlson. Bobby Kennedy's book speaks truth at a time when healthcare becomes health harm and untruth rules through anti-science and fake news. Dr. Vandana Shiva, director of Navdanya and author of Oneness vs. the 1%. The story of Dr. Fauci's rise and reign is really all about the absolute corruption of our major institutions, government, medicine, academia, and above all, the press by Big Pharma and the Gates Foundation. Those of us who really do believe in science now have this book to help rid the world of that corruption. Mark Crispin Miller, professor of media studies at New York University, editor News from Underground. As a trial lawyer, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has taken on the world's most powerful corporations and held them accountable for harming people and the environment. Those companies denied any wrongdoing, but time and time again, judges and juries were persuaded that Kennedy's position was the right one. Kennedy's information should always be considered with and agree or disagree. We all learn from listening. Tony Robbins, New York
So
Times bestselling author.
let me
Yes?
interrupt you, sorry. It's a great plug for the book, but I wanted to see if you had a comment specifically on the resolution.
Well, I was hoping this would help them understand the truth about the experimental gene therapy.
Yep,
And this is my Bible anyway.
it's an interesting, I've
But
seen
I
the
just
film.
suggest you all, before you make up any determinations, to read this book, please. It's the truth. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kelly, while he's coming up, I have a question. When, I guess I don't know where the medical freedom resolution came from, if you created that in a vacuum or you have a legal background or you stole it from another jurisdiction or borrowed it or. paid for
Internet,
it.
a lot of internet sources and actually came from several resolutions in Oregon and Florida, but the closest one is Oregon.
So I think that the person who spoke online, he made a great point in that if it's created in a vacuum,
It wasn't created in a vacuum.
so you had support who helped you.
Well, I wrote it myself and people are supporting it here.
But did you include anybody else in our community? I think that the hospitals and nursing
It's
homes
been
and
out
schools.
for, oh yes, we talked to Mr. Hickey. He sent us a letter. He just spoke a little bit ago as
And are
well.
his comments, were his comments incorporated into the document?
You just heard him thank me for changing the things we did.
So you'll continue that process? Because it feels like it's still a work in progress. Have you dealt with
Right now,
anybody
we've
from the
tabled
nursing
it and we've been able to change a few words. We'll come back with a clean copy at the next meeting and move forward.
Yeah, a thing I'd like to add, the world is full of self-pronounced experts. We've been on this issue since early 2020. So it's not like anything here isn't something that hasn't been circulating the halls inside the building, outside the building, elsewhere. All the people who have lost their livelihoods as a consequence have something to say. Regardless of the provenance, you look at the resolution and you decide, is there value there or not? It's in an ideal world, it doesn't matter who the messenger is. What matters is the message.
Yeah.
Right. Part of the problem, part of my frustration is that it wasn't circulated among the board until last meeting, 5 days before the last meeting. So as a member of the Board of Health, I didn't have an opportunity to do the research, to talk to people, to get other opinions, to gather the perspectives. And so from that perspective, it feels like it was sprung on us, kind of like the only one person got back to you for the request for proposals, request for qualifications. That was sprung. I didn't know it was coming. We
Yeah.
had not had a conversation in this board prior to it showing up on the agenda. And so we weren't able as a board to workshop it, to put it together, to add different ideas, to bring our areas of expertise into its development. And I think that that's a loss for the document.
I disagree that it was sprung on you. You saw it, you didn't give any comments.
We
a
saw it
month ago.
5 days before it came up.
That was a month ago.
It was sprung on us last
So now
month.
it's 5 weeks,
It was sprung on us last month, 5 days before.
but you
the
still
meeting.
haven't said a comment.
We didn't talk about it last month.
You had the opportunity to.
I don't want to split hairs with you, but when
It's
something
not splitting
shows up on
hairs.
the
You're,
agenda 5 days prior to a meeting, that doesn't give the board ample time to have a conversation.
well, in this
to
case,
do
it
a
was
workshop.
5 weeks.
But it was at the last meeting, Kelly. It showed up on the agenda last meeting, 5 days before the meeting. That doesn't give this board an opportunity to have a conversation, to do their research. And you miss an opportunity for the richness of this board to join you in developing that document.
I disagree. You were at the meeting. You had the time to comment. So it's been 5 weeks. You did get to comment,
Didn't get to it at the last meeting.
but you still haven't commented anything by email. You haven't said any corrections.
Kelly, I've talked the entire meeting today.
Right. So now it's open and we're having this discussion that you want.
But actually it's open, it's been open for, when you say 5 weeks, I would claim it's longer than that. There's nothing that prevents us from pursuing something. Like I think you think something's gone amiss. There's no reason you can't come in.
You misunderstand me. I don't think anything's gone amiss. I think an opportunity was missed, that he didn't invite the richness of this board, the combined experience of this board, the perspectives of this board, and the perspectives of the community before he developed that document.
Does somebody still had their hand up?
It was Darcy.
Is Darcy still there? Can you hear us? Nope. Go to
May
you,
I
sir.
speak?
Yes, please.
Okay. I had three questions. Whereas lockdowns, that passage, I would like proof to be submitted to citizens to show that statement is true. I don't believe that. And then whereas Cowlitz County suffered economic, I would like proof to see that that's true. I don't believe that either. And
So-
then whereas the state and federal mandates, I don't believe that statement is true either. I'd like to see proof for that. In general, on this statement, I think it's divisive. I don't think it's bringing people together. And I think it's redundant because all of these freedoms are already guaranteed to people in the Constitution. So I think it's redundant and I think it's divisive.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bob Runnels. I'm with Informed Choice Washington, and we look at policy across the state and in counties. And we are interested and eager for this resolution to go forward. We're happy that this county is considering it. I will offer some points that support some of the whereases in this resolution. And overall, I think there are people who are upset at what transpired and what was done as the response. The response set included the lockdowns and forced vaccinations in order to keep your job that violated the things that have been talked about today. Overall, was the mandate, was the actual state of emergency and so forth justified? And I offer, there's a statement in the resolution that talks about the 1% maximum fatality rate for the disease. So a study's come out in, where's the date? In January of this year, strong study, systematic study. If those of you keep track of how studies are done, systematic looks at other studies and summarizes their results. And they just looked at 31 studies before the pandemic, before the vaccine was, before the vaccine was available. This is all over 2020. The fatality rate, the thing we all got crazy about across the whole world, had a fatality rate of 0.0003% for people under the age of 19. That's add a couple extra zeros in there for the percent. And in addition, you have to actually catch the disease before this number becomes a number. So it's 3 in over 100,000 before that becomes an issue. 0.002% for those 20 to 29 years. 0.011%, 30 to 39 years. 0.035% for those 40 to 49 years old. And 0.123 for 50 to 59 years, 0.506 for those people 60 to 69. So that is on measure less than the flu. The fatality rate of COVID before the vaccine was less than the flu. I offer that paper here. And I do want to talk about also the additional measures that were put in place. The masking, it sounds like that's been covered here by another community member. But just this year, again, if we're going to play by the rules, we look at the CDC documents. They have reissued not an approval, but an emergency use authorization, the same emergency use authorization for masks that they did in 2020. They've reissued that in 2023, where it says no descriptive printed matter and advertising promotional materials related to use or authorization of the surgical mask, the same blue stuff you see on almost everybody, may represent or suggest that such a product is safe or effective for the prevention or treatment of COVID-19. So taking another note from another commenter today, the Nuremberg Code is put in place in our code, US code anyway, to prevent any mandating of any of that. No shaming, no restriction of public places. If you're going to play by the rules, the EUA says that is not the case. You cannot mandate that. You have to allow for declining and refusal. That was not done. People are upset. I think on balance, Cowlitz County people are upset that this happened and we don't want this to happen again. Now, if you continue with this resolution and iron out the finer points, you will not be alone. Other counties, county commission levels, not just boards of health, but county commission levels have approved similar medical freedom resolutions. Sarasota County, Florida, 4 times the size of Cowlitz County, they have approved a medical freedom resolution similarly written. Washington County, Idaho, they have approved it at the county commission level. Very similar. They're actually not that similar in that case. Washington is actually, they are recommending against the shots for young people with their resolution. But these things are moving forward, and I side with the counselor who, or the commissioner who recommended more information be put on the website. None of this kind of information would be put on the website. That's the truth that's out there that needs to be shared of these other perspectives. And so in balance with the other data that was shared first by the guy who stormed out about the deaths and basically yelling fire in a crowded theater as he walks out, that needs to be taken into perspective with the actual vaccine deaths that have been measured in the state. The state has on record 222 deaths from the vaccine. It's in the VAERS report. I offer this paper and I can give it to the secretary who can share the copies with you. And so this needs to be taken on balance. And for anybody who would still support mandated vaccines, I have to ask, if the vaccines work, the people who are vaccinated don't have anything to worry about, right? You can operate on a personal decision. You can go by the resolution previously passed by this council, this commission. If the vaccines don't work, and I have on record Rochelle Walensky saying they don't stop transmission or infection, then they don't work as intended, then at best, you have a personal choice. Other counties, other countries are not recommending the shots anymore. Again, I appreciate the resolution for where it's headed. I think this would go far at beginning steps of making sure this doesn't happen again, and that our rights that should be inherent are respected. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to say this wasn't done in a vacuum. This has been talked about for a long time. It's at least 5 weeks. For 5 weeks, it's been this board.
Thank you. My name is Scott Olson. I'm applaud you for trying to put together this kind of resolution, because I agree with a lot of that's on there. I've had grandkids affected adversely who are living with me because of the mandates and the lack of being able to go to school, and they needing that social interaction that they weren't getting in their environment till my wife and I came here to start taking care of them. And they became part of our family for a while till my daughter worked things out and they went back. But that time, one of them has not recovered yet. She's now 19, unemployed, never got a diploma from high school. And it's not that there weren't some choices made, there were, but I appreciate the fact that we are affected. You know, I know personally people who had family members locked up in nursing homes and could not visit them in their final stages of life. How ridiculous is that? How inhumane is that? I've also served and Kelly, it's hard chairing a board sometimes and trying to get everybody on the same page, because you have diversity for a reason. It's to get that input from different people and have that effect of coming up with the synergy of better decisions and better solutions as a result of those differing opinions. But I have often found that that you need board members too, to outside of the actual meetings to do some work and come again to the meetings with their ideas and their suggestions, and not be so critical of whatever somebody did or didn't do or whatever. Where do we move forward from here? The why of this is there's a lot of people in the public that are saying, I don't want to be told what to do with my own body and my choices with that. Because again, I myself have read this study and that study and go all over the board. One says this, one says that. Where do you go? I pray about it for my ultimate decisions. And I would go back and do some things differently and maybe be, even to a certain extent, more defiant. You know, this, all it does to me, it articulates the things that I'm feeling is that I do have rights. And I should not have government dictating to me and restricting me with respect to that. Now, again, how far that goes, but we kick people out of jobs. And I say we, the system, when it was put into place, mandated some of these things and made it a requirement for employment. Again, how ridiculous is that? I didn't take a job saying I will let you rule my life, you know, we need to do better. We do need to learn from this circumstance. And as was just said, this goes a long way of at least saying here in Cowes County, we have determined that maybe that was a little bit unfair and we're not going to just start off by caving in to whatever's being mandated to us, but you're listening. And I'm one of the public. I'm one person that's saying before you today, thank you for making this effort, and I want my freedoms left to me. And appreciate this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Great. So at this point, I think we're probably ready to adjourn. The motion's been tabled. I promise to come back with a clean copy based on the lawyer's comments and what we discussed today. And I will send it well before the meeting, so everybody has time to read it. And with that,
And you'll also have it on the website?
and we'll make sure that the web links are working. Yep, I have a note here. And we will get it on the website as well. So with that said, we'll call the meeting adjourned at 11:08.
How about 12:06?
Sorry, 12:06.